My bank app pinged at 2:17 a.m., and the name on the attempted beneficiary change was my brother-in-law. I stared at the screen in the dark, silent, while something in my chest went cold and heavy. My name is Genevieve. I am 33, and I work as a pediatric nurse at a county hospital. I am also the wife of Dawson, the kind of man who never forgot birthdays, never missed a school pickup, and never went to bed without kissing our son's forehead. On Tuesday evening, Dawson drove home from work like he always did. Same route, same exit, same right turn by the gas station where he used to grab a sports drink on game nights. But a truck ran the red light and folded the driver's side of his car like paper. When I got to the ER, the waiting room lights felt too bright. The air smelled like sanitizer and burnt coffee. A nurse guided me into a small family room and said the words that split my life in half. Severe brain trauma. 9 hours in surgery. We cannot predict when or if he will wake up. I sat by his bed every day after that. I learned the language of machines, the rhythm of beeps, the way the ventilator sounded when it pushed air into him. I held his hand and talked like he could hear me because I needed to believe he could. I told him about our son, Wesley, 8 years old, missing his front tooth again because he kept wiggling it with his tongue. I told Dawson how Wesley still put his cleats on the wrong feet when he was nervous. I described the spelling words taped to our fridge. I played Dawson's favorite old playoff highlights on my phone with the volume low, like a prayer. On day 4, his brother Rhodes showed up. He stood in the doorway as if the room belonged to him. Dawson lay there hooked to tubes and monitors, his hair shaved in patches, his face bruised and swollen. Rhodes did not cry. He did not even step closer. He asked me if Dawson had life insurance. I remember blinking at him, slow, like my brain needed time to understand the cruelty of the question. My husband's chest rose and fell with help from a machine, and this man wanted numbers. I told him I was not talking about money, while Dawson was fighting for his life. Rhodes shrugged like I was being dramatic. He said someone had to be practical. He said Dawson had assets, and someone needed to manage them if things went bad. Things went bad. They were already bad, but I stayed quiet. I was too tired to argue, too afraid that if I raised my voice in that room, Dawson would never come back. Rhodes left, and I thought that was the end of it. 3 days later, he came back with papers. He walked into the waiting area like he owned the place, carrying a folder and a smug patience that made my skin crawl. He said he had spoken to a lawyer. He said he had questions about the line of inheritance. I told him I did not understand what he was doing. He leaned in and lowered his voice, like he was sharing a secret. He said he had concerns about Wesley. My stomach tightened so fast it almost hurt. Concerns about an 8-year-old child, while his father lay unconscious. I asked him what concerns. Rhodes looked at me and said he did not believe Wesley was Dawson's biological son. At first, I thought I misheard him. The hospital hallway sounded like distant footsteps and rolling carts, but his words were crystal clear in my ears. He said Wesley did not look like Dawson. He said the hair was too dark. The eyes were wrong. He said it was suspicious that I got pregnant so quickly after Dawson and I started dadding. He said maybe I trapped Dawson with another man's baby. My mouth went dry. My hands were shaking, but I kept them folded in my lap so he could not see. He used the word bastard about my son in the same building where my husband's skull had been opened to save his brain. I stood up slowly because if I moved too fast, I thought I might slap him and get arrested, and I could not afford that. I told him to leave. He smiled, calm as a banker. He said I would not talk like that when a judge got involved. I told him to leave again, and I said security would remove him. Rhodes nodded like he expected that. Then he said the part that was even uglier than the accusation. He demanded a DNA test. He said if I refused, it would prove I had something to hide. He said he could get a court order. He said once it was proven Wesley was not Dawson's child, he would petition to be named next of kin and take control of Dawson's estate. I remember looking past Rhodes at the elevator doors, thinking about how easily people walked in and out of this hospital, while my life was frozen inside one room. That night, I went home and sat at our kitchen table while my mother watched Wesley in the living room. I could hear the cartoon laughter from the TV, and it felt wrong, like joy had no place in our house anymore. I opened my phone and stared at that bank alert again. Beneficiary change attempt. Rhodes's name. Denied. Denied only because I had set the account to require my approval after we bought the house. Dawson had teased me for being cautious. He called it my nurse brain, always planning for worst-case scenarios. I stared at that alert and realized something terrifying. Rhodes had not just been talking. He had already tried to move money. The next morning, I met with a lawyer named Celeste. Her office smelled like paper and lemon cleaner. She listened without interrupting, her pen moving in quick strokes. When I finished, she looked up and said Rhodes was playing a dangerous game. She also said something that made my heart thud hard. Because Dawson was incapacitated, the court could entertain petitions about medical decision-making and financial management. If Rhodes convinced a judge there was doubt about Wesley's paternity, he could drag us into a legal mess right when I was most vulnerable. I wanted to scream. Instead, I inhaled slowly and asked what I should do. Celeste told me to document everything. Every message, every attempt, every bank alert, every time Rhodes showed up. She told me to stay calm in writing and let him expose himself, so I did. When Rhodes texted, I replied with one word. Okay. When he emailed, I responded politely. Please direct all communication through my attorney. When he tried to corner me at the hospital again, I looked past him and asked a nurse for security without raising my voice. He hated that, I could tell. 2 weeks later, Rhodes filed his petition. I sat in court in a sweater that still smelled faintly of hospital air, while Rhodes sat across the aisle in a pressed jacket like this was a business meeting. His attorney spoke about protecting Dawson's legacy, about preventing misrepresentation, about reasonable doubt. I wanted to stand up and tell the judge that the only doubt here was how a human being could be so rotten. But Celeste placed her hand lightly on my wrist, a quiet reminder. Let him talk. Let him show who he is. The judge agreed to hear the case. And just like that, while my husband lay in a coma, my family became a lawsuit. In the hallway afterward, Rhodes walked near me and said he was sorry it had to be this way. His voice was smooth, almost kind, and it made me feel sick because I could see how easily he could fool strangers. He said if I just agreed to the test, we could settle everything quickly. I looked at him and pictured Wesley's face when he asked if his dad would wake up. I pictured my husband's hand in mine, warm but unresponsive. I pictured Rhodes sitting at my table someday, spending money that was meant to keep Dawson alive. I did not argue. I nodded once. I told him I would do the DNA test. Rhodes's eyes lit up, just a flash, like he had already cashed the check in his head. Quick real-life pause. Some nights I edit these late and it gets lonely. Like, subscribe and tell me your city or country. All right, back to the story. The test was scheduled at a certified lab on Friday afternoon. I brought Wesley and myself. He wore his soccer hoodie and kept asking if we were doing this because Dad was sick. I told him it was paperwork stuff, grown-up stuff, and that none of it changed who we were. He looked up at me with Dawson's exact expression, that serious little focus, and he said okay, like he was trying to be brave for me. At the lab, the air smelled like sterile wipes. A technician with gentle eyes swabbed Wesley's cheek, while Rhodes watched through the glass partition like a predator waiting for a door to open. They also collected Dawson's sample at the hospital. Rhodes insisted on being present for that too, as if he did not trust the nurses, as if he did not trust me, as if he thought my grief was a disguise. Afterward, Rhodes cornered me in the parking lot. He said once the results came back, everything would be clear. He said he hoped I was ready to do the right thing. I stared at him for a long second, and I felt something inside me settle into place. Because while Rhodes was busy hunting for blood in a DNA report, Celeste had been hunting too. And the day before the swab, she called me with a discovery that changed the shape of this entire war. Her voice was calm, but there was a sharpness under it when she said, I found something Rhodes does not know exists. I gripped my phone so hard my knuckles ached and whispered, What? Celeste said, Dawson updated his estate documents after Wesley was born, and Rhodes is not going to like what he changed. My stomach flipped, not with fear this time, but with a sharp, clean kind of clarity. Celeste told me Dawson signed a new will and new powers of attorney 2 months after Wesley was born. Everything went to me, in trust for our son. Rhodes got a small, symbolic amount that could not be challenged without exposing bad faith. Celeste said Dawson did it because he had seen how Rhodes acted around money long before we married. He never told me, because he did not want me carrying that stress. I pressed my forehead to the cool kitchen window and watched the streetlight glow on our empty driveway. I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt nauseous, because the timing hit me like a second accident. If Rhodes did not know about the updated documents, it meant he was filing petitions based on an old story. And the moment he realized the truth, he would either back down or he would get uglier. Celeste said, "We are going to stay calm. We are going to let him keep walking forward. And then we are going to close the door behind him." I whispered, "What do you need from me?" She told me to bring every bank alert, every email, every text. She told me to take screenshots and forward them to a secure folder. She told me to stop answering Rhodes directly unless she approved the wording, because anything I wrote could be twisted in court. Then she said the one thing that made my hands start shaking again. She said, "I also want a copy of Dawson's hospital records showing sedation levels and incapacity. If Rhodes tries to claim your husband agreed to anything during this time, we will crush that." That was when I realized Rhodes had not only been trying to prove my child was not my husband's. He was trying to build a narrative where I was unfit, dishonest, and unstable, so a judge would hand him authority. And I had been so focused on Dawson waking up that I almost missed the fact that someone was quietly trying to take my life apart while I held his hand. The next morning, I went to the hospital earlier than usual. The lobby was still half asleep, the coffee kiosk barely open, the floors freshly waxed so they shone like a warning. I sat with Dawson and talked like always. I told him about the DNA test being scheduled, not because I wanted to fill him with anger, but because I needed him anchored to us, to his real life, to the family waiting for him. I said, "I am handling it. I am not letting anyone touch what you built. You just focus on coming back." His fingers did not move. His eyes did not open. But his skin was warm, and I chose to believe that mattered. In the afternoon, I met with a hospital patient advocate named Colette. She was the type of woman who spoke softly but never apologized for taking up space. She reviewed my questions about consent and medical decision rights, and she confirmed what Celeste had already told me. Until Dawson woke up, decisions belonged to me, his spouse, not his brother. But Colette added something that made my pulse spike. She said, "Someone has been requesting information about your husband's billing and coverage. Not full details, because we did not release them, but enough to raise a flag." I asked who. Colette hesitated, then said, "It was listed as family. It was Rhodes." I sat very still. The fluorescent lights above us hummed, and I could hear my own breathing like it was too loud. Colette told me she documented the requests and locked down the account with an extra verification step. She told me if anyone called again, they would be redirected to me. I thanked her, and I meant it, but inside I was watching the pieces click together. Rhodes was not just chasing inheritance. He was trying to control the flow of care. If he could get access, he could pressure billing, stall payments, create chaos. Chaos would make me look irresponsible. Chaos would make him look like the calm solution. I left that meeting and walked straight to the parking garage, sat in my car, and cried so hard my throat hurt. Not because I felt helpless, because I finally understood the kind of person Rhodes was. That night, he emailed me from a new address. The subject line said, "Final chance to cooperate." He wrote that he was willing to settle if I agreed to a temporary guardianship arrangement for Dawson's estate, pending the DNA results. He framed it like kindness, like compromise, but the wording was slick, temporary, pending, neutral third party. It was the type of language that sounded reasonable to strangers and dangerous to anyone who actually read it. I forwarded it to Celeste without replying. Celeste responded 5 minutes later. "Do not answer. We will answer for you." I stared at my phone in my quiet kitchen and felt something harden. This was not grief anymore. This was strategy. The day of the lab appointment arrived. Wesley climbed into the backseat and buckled himself, trying to act normal. He brought a small plastic soccer ball and rolled it between his palms as we drove, like he could keep the world steady by keeping his hands busy. In the waiting room, Rhodes sat with his ankle crossed over his knee, like he was at an airport lounge. He smiled at Wesley, and Wesley looked at the floor. I hated that smile. It was not warmth, it was ownership. The technician called us back. The swab was quick. Wesley did not flinch. He just stared at the wall and blinked too fast. Rhodes watched every step, as if he expected me to swap samples like a movie villain. When it was done, Rhodes walked beside me in the hallway and said, "If you are innocent, this will be easy." I looked straight ahead and said, "Okay." He laughed under his breath, like he thought my calm was surrender. That's when I realized the worst part. Rhodes did not understand silence. He thought quiet meant weakness. He thought restraint meant guilt. I let him keep thinking that. 2 days later, my bank app pinged again. Not a beneficiary attempt this time. A new account inquiry. A soft pull on Dawson's credit. An application started, then abandoned. I called the bank immediately, my voice calm, my hands shaking. The fraud specialist's name was Hayes. He spoke to me like he had heard this story 100 times, but he still sounded angry on my behalf when he asked if Dawson was able to authorize anything. I told him the truth. My husband was in a coma. My husband could not authorize a grocery list. Hayes locked the account, added protections, and told me something that made my stomach drop. The inquiry had been initiated with information only close family would know. Dawson's full social, his employer history, his previous address, details that were not on public record. I did not need proof to know who had it, but I wanted proof anyway, so I did what nurses do when something feels wrong. I started collecting data. I pulled our shared cloud storage and checked for logins. I checked the family tablet Dawson used for fantasy sports and found an email forwarded to a device I did not recognize. I checked the settings and saw a new recovery phone number added to his email account, not mine. I took screenshots. I took more screenshots. I saved them in a folder labeled Wesley School Forms because I knew Rhodes would never think to look there if he ever got access. Then I called Celeste and told her Rhodes was not waiting for the DNA results. He was already trying to become Dawson. Celeste went quiet for a beat, then said, "Good. Let him keep going." Her tone was not cruel. It was precise. She said, "We are going to use the timeline. Every attempt, every login, every pull. We are going to show the court that he is not protecting your husband. He is exploiting him." I asked when we would show Rhodes the updated will. Celeste said, "Not yet." She said, "If he knows he gets nothing, he will either disappear or he will panic and do something stupid. I would rather he do something stupid while we are watching." The DNA results were due the next week. The days crawled. Meanwhile, Dawson's sedation was reduced again, and still he did not wake. I kept reading to him anyway. I kept playing his music. I kept telling him about Wesley's jokes, about the meal train Colette helped organize, about how our neighbors kept leaving grocery bags on the porch like they were sneaking us hope. Then suddenly, Rhodes showed up at the hospital with flowers. Flowers. He walked into Dawson's room like a grieving brother, placed them on the counter, and sighed loud enough for the nurses to hear. He even squeezed Dawson's shoulder, gentle, like he was acting for a camera that was not there. A nurse I did not recognize smiled at him, and that is when I felt it, sharp and cold. Someone was buying his performance. Rhodes turned to me, voice soft, and said, "I just want what Dawson would want." I looked at him and smiled anyway, because I had already spoken to Colette. I had already flagged his information requests. I had already locked down the billing access. I had already sent Hayes the fraud report. And Celeste had already prepared the updated will, sealed and ready. Rhodes was standing in my husband's room, pretending to be the hero. But I had proof that he was the one trying to steal the keys, while the owner was unconscious. 3 days later, the lab called Celeste first, as arranged. She called me immediately afterward. Her voice had that same sharp calm as before, but now it carried something else too. Something like surprise. She said, "The paternity result is clear." I closed my eyes and exhaled, not because I doubted it, but because I wanted it over. Then Celeste added, "And there is an additional finding in the report that the lab flagged as unusual. It involves Rhodes." My whole body went still. I asked, "What do you mean it involves Rhodes?" Celeste said, "Come to my office. Right now, do not tell anyone you are coming." I drove to Celeste's office with my hands locked on the steering wheel, so tight my wrists ached. Every red light felt personal. The sky was that flat hospital gray, and the world outside my windshield looked normal in a way that almost offended me. Celeste buzzed me in without small talk. Her receptionist was gone, the waiting room empty, like she had cleared the building for what she was about to say. She led me straight into her office and shut the door. She did not sit down. She placed a folder on the desk and opened it slowly, like she was controlling the temperature of the moment. I stepped closer and looked at the paperwork. The first page showed what I expected. The paternity test confirmed Dawson was Wesley's biological father. My throat loosened, just a fraction, like a knot finally giving up. Celeste held up one finger, stopping my relief from spilling out. Then she turned the page. This section had a different heading. It referenced the court-requested kinship panel, a sibling relationship analysis, ordered because Rhodes had filed to be considered next of kin, and the judge wanted documentation beyond a birth certificate. I stared at the lines and felt the room tilt. Celeste said, "Rhodes and Dawson are not full siblings." My mouth opened, but no sound came out. She pointed to the conclusion. Her her nail tapping the paper with quiet certainty. The report indicated the probability of full sibling relationship was essentially excluded. It also indicated the probability of half-sibling relationship was extremely low. In plain language, the lab was saying Rhodes was not Dawson's brother by blood. I sat down hard in the chair, like my legs had turned off. My mind ran through memories I never questioned. Family holidays, Rhodes sitting across the table, Rhodes calling Dawson his brother, Rhodes standing in the hospital doorway like he had rights. Celeste watched my face and spoke gently, but she did not soften the truth. She said, "This explains why he is so desperate. Because if he is not legally adopted, if he is not named properly, his claim collapses. And if he has been living off the assumption that he belongs, this paper just lit a match under him." I whispered, "How is this even possible?" Celeste said, "There are a few possibilities. An affair, a secret adoption, a family story nobody corrected because it was easier. But we do not have to solve their history to win this case." She slid another stack of papers toward me. These were my screenshots, the unknown device, the recovery number, the soft pull on Dawson's credit, the beneficiary change attempt. Celeste said, "The judge wanted to protect Dawson's estate from you. But the evidence shows Rhodes is the one trying to access it, and he did it while Dawson was incapacitated. That is not protection. That is exploitation." My hands shook as I held the pages. I felt anger, but under it was something darker, a delayed horror. If Rhodes was not really family, then the way he watched Wesley in that lab waiting room had been even uglier than I understood. Not a bitter uncle, a stranger with entitlement. I asked Celeste what we do now. She said, "We do nothing loud. We do it clean." She explained the next steps, like she was reading a recipe. First, she would file a motion to dismiss Rhodes's petition due to lack of standing. Second, she would request an emergency hearing based on attempted fraud and identity access. Third, she would notify the bank and credit bureaus with legal documentation showing Dawson's incapacity. Fourth, she would ask the court for an order that barred Rhodes from contact and from any further financial inquiries. I heard her words, but all I could see was Dawson in his hospital bed, his hand limp in mine, while someone tried to steal his name. I asked, "Do we tell his mother?" Celeste paused, then said, "We should eventually. But we do not have to be the ones to deliver the family secret today. Today, we protect your husband. Today, we protect your child." I nodded. It was the first thing I could control, the boundary of today. When I walked out of Celeste's office, my phone buzzed. "Rhodes," a text message. He wrote, "Results are in. Tell me you did not lie to me." I stared at the screen, feeling my heartbeat in my fingertips. For a second, I wanted to type everything. I wanted to send the report like a weapon. Instead, I did what Celeste taught me. I replied with one word. "Okay." 3 minutes later, he called. I let it ring. Then I forwarded the voicemail to Celeste. A moment after that, another bank alert popped up. A new attempt. This time, it was not a beneficiary change. It was an attempt to reset the password on Dawson's retirement account. The timing made my stomach twist. Rhodes had sensed the ground shifting, even without proof. He was panicking. He was doing exactly what Celeste predicted, and because he was panicking, he was leaving fingerprints everywhere. That afternoon, I went to the hospital and sat beside Dawson like I always did. The room was dim, the blinds half closed, the monitor lights reflecting off the metal rails of the bed. I held his hand and talked to him with a calm voice that did not match the storm inside me. I told him I found what I needed. "I am keeping you safe. Wesley is safe. You just come back." I paused, then added the truth, because I refused to let someone else write our story. I said, "Rhodes tried to take your money. He tried to take your name, and it is ending." I felt my throat tighten, but I swallowed it down. Not because I was numb, because I had learned that some emotions need to wait until the room is secure. 2 days later, we were back in court. Rhodes arrived with his attorney in the same confident posture, but his eyes were wrong. Restless. Sharp. He looked like a man who had not slept. When Celeste stood, she did not raise her voice. She simply handed the judge the lab report, then the timeline of Rhodes's attempted account access, then the documentation from the hospital proving Dawson's incapacity during every attempt. Rhodes's attorney tried to object. Celeste did not argue. She just asked the judge to read the conclusion line by line. The judge's face changed slowly, like watching a door close. The judge asked Rhodes one question. "If you are not the biological sibling, and you have no legal adoption record on file, what exactly is your standing to petition this court?" Rhodes's mouth opened, then shut. He looked toward his attorney, but his attorney was flipping through papers as if the floor had turned into ice under his shoes. Rhodes finally spoke, and his voice cracked in the room. He said, "I was raised as his brother." The judge nodded once, not unkind but firm. Then the judge said, "Being raised in a role does not grant you the right to access an incapacitated man's finances, attempt credit applications in his name, or harass his spouse and child with accusations for personal gain." Rhodes's face flushed. He started to speak again, but the judge lifted a hand and stopped him. The judge dismissed his petition. Then the judge granted Celeste's request for a protective order, pending further review. Finally, the judge referred the fraud documentation to the appropriate authorities for investigation. I did not look at Rhodes when it happened. I kept my eyes on the judge because I refused to give Rhodes the satisfaction of seeing me react. But I felt Rhodes's stare like heat on my cheek as he stood there realizing he had overplayed everything. Outside the courtroom, Rhodes caught up to me in the hallway. He hissed my name, low and furious. Celeste stepped between us without touching him. Her voice was calm. She told him any further communication would be considered a violation. Rhodes's eyes flicked to mine, and in them I saw something I did not expect. Not just anger, fear, because now he understood he was not fighting for 40%. He was fighting to avoid consequences. That night, I went home and tucked Wesley into bed. He asked if Dad was getting better. I sat on the edge of the mattress and chose my words carefully. I told him Dad was still healing, but the doctors were hopeful. I told him the grown-up problems were being handled. I told him he did not have to carry any of it. Wesley looked at me with those same serious eyes and whispered, "Uncle Rhodes was mean." I felt the ache behind my ribs, but I kept my voice steady. I said, "Yes, and that is why he is not allowed to hurt us anymore." Wesley nodded, then reached for my hand like he was making sure I was real. I held his hand until he fell asleep. 3 days after court, Dr. Cook called me into the hallway outside Dawson's room. Her face held that cautious excitement again, like she was trying not to jinx anything. She said Dawson had been more responsive during therapy. He tracked movement. He followed simple commands. He was forming words again, slowly but clearly. Then she said, "He asked for you." When I walked into the room, Dawson's eyes were open. He looked thinner, older, but his gaze found me and it held. I sat down and took his hand, and for a moment neither of us spoke. There are some reunions that do not need language. Finally, Dawson whispered my name, rough and uneven, but real. I smiled through tears and told him I was here. His eyes shifted, like he was searching for something behind mine. He whispered Wesley. I told him Wesley was okay. I told him Wesley was brave. I told him Wesley was still wearing his cleats on the wrong feet sometimes. A faint smile tugged at the corner of Dawson's mouth, then faded into exhaustion. He swallowed and whispered, "Rhodes." My stomach tightened, but I did not lie. I did not sugarcoat it. I told him Rhodes tried to force a DNA test while he was in a coma. I told him Rhodes tried to access accounts. I told him we went to court. Dawson closed his eyes for a long moment. A tear slid from the corner of one eye and disappeared into the pillow. Then he opened his eyes and whispered, "Did you win?" I leaned in close, my voice soft and steady. I told him yes, quietly. His fingers squeezed mine, weak but deliberate. He whispered, "Thank you." Over the next month, Dawson's recovery was slow but steady. Physical therapy, speech therapy, paperwork, bills, long afternoons where he fell asleep mid-sentence. Celeste finalized everything. The accounts were secured. A fraud alert stayed on Dawson's credit. The protective order became permanent. Rhodes did not come near our house again. Weeks later, Dawson's mother, Magnolia, came to visit. She sat at our kitchen table, staring at her hands, and told Dawson the truth without looking up. She confessed that Rhodes was the son of a man she dated briefly before she met Dawson's father. She said she took Rhodes in when his situation became unstable. She said she raised him with Dawson because she wanted them both to have family, and over time, the lie stopped feeling like a lie. Dawson listened quietly. When she finished, he did not yell. He did not shame her. He just said, "I loved him as my brother." He did not love me back the same way. Magnolia cried into a napkin, and I watched Dawson's face harden and soften at the same time. Grief for what was real. Relief that the danger was over. Disappointment that love could be used like a key. That night, after Wesley went to bed, Dawson sat beside me on the couch with his cane leaned against the cushion. He looked at me and said, "I keep thinking about what would have happened if you had believed you had to be loud to win." I answered honestly. I told him I wanted to be loud every day. I wanted to break something. I wanted to scream in court and in the hospital and in that lab waiting room. I told him, but I remembered Wesley watching me, and I remembered you lying there unable to defend us. So I stayed quiet. I let him think I was weak, and I let him walk into every trap he set for himself. Dawson nodded slowly, as if he was saving those words somewhere inside him. The next morning, I watched through our living room window as Dawson walked Wesley to the bus stop, moving carefully, but moving on his own. Wesley hugged him, tight, then ran up the bus steps and waved from the window. Dawson raised his hand and waved back, his eyes shining. When he turned and walked back toward the house, he looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time. He said he tried to erase our son with a test. I stepped onto the porch, my voice calm, my heart full of heat. I said, and all he proved was that you are Wesley's father, and he never deserved to be anyone's brother. The end.